words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be an acceptable offering to you, our rock and our Redeemer. That reading today, it was such a good reading to kind of summarize what Jesus is coming to do, what Jesus is coming to share. And so, as part of Advent, when we're preparing for the coming of Jesus, it's good to look at that. It's not quite the shepherds and magi and the trip to Bethlehem that we might expect, but it is part of our journey to begin to understand what Jesus is bringing to us. And what Jesus is bringing to us is a ministry of love. But it's not quite the ministry that we might expect. We open with John the Baptist. Now, by this point, he's been arrested, he's in prison. It's not going to be long before he leaves the story. He's heard about what Jesus is doing. Don't forget, when he first met Jesus at the banks of the River Jordan, he said, I'm supposed to be baptized by you. You're the greater one who's coming after me. And now as he hears what's going on, he's starting to have doubts. He's expecting that out of the line of David will come a great military ruler. He expects someone who's going to take the fight to Rome and to the Roman occupiers. And he hasn't heard any of that happening yet. He hasn't heard anything that he expects to happen. So he sends his disciples, his followers, to Jesus to say, okay, are you the one we're expecting? Are you that Messiah who's going to liberate Israel? Or should we start looking for someone else? Did we misidentify you? Did we make a mistake here? Now you might think at this, Jesus kind of said, whoa, wait, no, I am the one. You got it right. But Jesus doesn't quite say that. Instead, Jesus says, look, you tell me. That's kind of where he goes with it. You tell me. Look at what's happening here. Look at what's happening. Look at the people who are being cured. The blind, they can see. The deaf, they can hear. The mute, they can speak. I mean, there's some liberation right there. The lame, they can get up and walk. There's some liberation right there. There's some freedom that I'm bringing right there. Look, the dead are being raised. Whoa. And most importantly, the biggest thing of all, the one thing you should all be looking for, is that good news is being preached to the poor. That good news that God is coming to be among us is being shared. Not as some promise of the future, but it's being fulfilled right now. And all of that is being shared. So you tell me, am I the Messiah that you're waiting for, or should you be looking for someone else? Jesus is pointing to all of this gospel work being done. All of this ministry of love, lifting people up. And that while Jesus is lifting people up in love, the land is being redeemed. The people are being brought back to God because they're seeing what is possible with God. And then Jesus says, God blesses those who don't fall away because of me. Now some translations say, God blesses those who aren't offended because of me. Because Jesus is really doing things quite differently than what everyone expects. Jesus knows this. Jesus knows everyone's waiting for that military ruler. Everyone's waiting for that army that's going to go take it to Rome. And he knows he's not doing that. And some people might be a little offended. Some people might be saying, oh, well, you're curing people, you're healing people. That's great, Jesus, but you're not healing the right people. You're not hanging out and preaching with the right people. You're preaching with the poor. What are they going to do? And some people might be offended. Some people might say, well, enough of this. But to the don't, the people who stick with Jesus, God is going to bless. God is going to be with them. People always get confused. They think that blessing means material wealth or easy life or something. No, no, no. It just means God is going to be with you in those really dark and difficult times. Jesus' ministry was not what was expected, but it was of God. It was all rooted in that love of God. Everything that we have seen up to there in Matthew and everything we're going to see after that, and in all the other Gospels, is rooted in that idea of love. And Jesus, he stayed present with John the Baptist's disciples. He didn't say, oh yeah, of course I am. You see all these verses? See how I fulfill them? Aha! Jesus just says, come and see. See what's happening, and then you tell me. Ask your questions. Take a look at what's happening, and then see if this is the good news you want to follow. See if I'm preaching the good news that is going to liberate Israel. And God's ministry of love, as we see, redeemed Israel. Redeemed those who followed. Gave strength and courage to those who followed Jesus and enabled them to do such incredible things. So the disciples of John the Baptist, they seem kind of satisfied. They're like, okay, well, we've got our answer. We're going to go back to John the Baptist and we'll tell them what we've seen. And then Jesus turns to the crowds. Now, some of them have seen this. They know exactly what was said. Some of them maybe not. But he says to them, all right, you guys, you all came out to the wilderness to see John the Baptist. And when he came out, what did you expect? Did you expect someone who was weak, who was just going to be swayed all over the place? That weak reed? Well, I mean, of course nobody came out to see that. But it is in the desert. It's what you would expect. So he says, well, did you expect someone in nice fancy robes? Did you expect someone who looked like they were well put together, well polished? Jesus said, if you were looking for that kind of person, that kind of person's in palaces. They're back in the city. Why'd you come all the way out here to see someone who's in the city? No, you guys came out here, he says, to see a prophet. And a prophet isn't either of those things. A prophet isn't necessarily someone who's well-dressed and conforms to society's standards. And a prophet isn't someone who's weak and always changing their message. A prophet is someone else. Prophets prepare us. Prophets point the way to the next step. Prophets point to where we need to go. In the beginning of our godly play, story of Adam, we heard about the prophets, the hand of the prophet that points to Bethlehem. And remember, the prophets didn't know what was going to happen, but they knew where. And today we might not know what's going to happen. We might not know what the future looks like. We know there's going to be a future. And we know that the decisions that we make here and now are going to affect that future. And we heard from those people that went to see John the Baptist that some of them were saying, oh, well, we're descendants of Abraham. Of course, we're saved. We're good. John the Baptist says, no. That's not going to count. Unless you're bearing good fruit, unless you're doing good things, unless you're making decisions to follow God and to follow Jesus, it doesn't matter about everything that's in the past. What matters is what you decide to do right here and now. John the Baptist was pointing the way to redemption through love. That God wanted to make space for fruitful trees. To give things a chance to grow and flourish. God was working through love, sending prophets out of love for all of the people so they could hear it. And so that they could follow. So they could see where the prophets were pointing, so they could hear that good news that there is a way, and they would follow that way. And God's love unexpectedly redeemed Israel. Jesus finishes by saying that John the Baptist is the greatest who ever lived. I tell you, no living person is greater than John the Baptist. But you know what? In the kingdom of heaven, he's the least. Ooh. So what does that mean? Well, John the Baptist was the prophet pointing to God's unexpected ministry. But that meant that people had to be ready to change. They had to be open to the idea of changing. And even John the Baptist had certain expectations. Certain things that he thought, okay, this is what Messiah's got to do. This is how Israel's going to be redeemed. We're going to fight Rome. We're going to regain our independence, our sovereignty. Jesus says, no. No, there's a better way. To free ourselves from Rome, that would be a long battle, a long war. We can be redeemed right now. Doesn't matter if Rome's in the picture or not. We can follow God right now. We don't need to wait for our own sovereignty. Jesus is saying those who are in the kingdom community of heaven, those of the kingdom, they aren't waiting for certain things to happen. They're just doing the ministry now. They're open to how the Spirit might move them in unexpected ways. And because they don't expect how things are going to happen, that's what makes them citizens of the kingdom community of heaven. They're open to reimagining what might be possible. The King who has come shatters all of our expectations. In first century Palestine, they were expecting the son of a ruler would come to liberate them. And what they got was the son of a carpenter, born in a stable, wrapped in strips of cloth, not even one piece of cloth, just some bands thrown together so they might be warm in the winter. That's what they got. Because God entered the world in that way, God was able to stand with the poor. The whole story of God is standing with the poor. With the Hebrew slaves in Egypt. With the oppressed people in the Babylonian exile. And with the subjugated Israelites living under Rome. God was always with those who were on the outside. Those who society said were powerless, God has always been with them, lifting them up out of love. We might expect political change first, but Jesus is redeeming right now. We might expect that in the kingdom community of heaven we're going to have a smooth life. But Jesus leads us to the cross. But we might expect a little bit of judgment and condemnation, a little bit of, yes, you're right, and no one else is. Jesus just loves. Jesus just shares that love with everyone. And when love reigns, when love is the rule of the land, then the land is redeemed. Love reigns when we are present with those who might disagree with us. Love reigns when we're curious about the differences between us, when we ask questions. And love reigns when we are open to the possibility of what the Spirit might lead us to do, of how the Spirit might influence our lives and change the reality that we're living in into the kingdom community of heaven. Love takes us in unexpected directions. The love of God is something that seems foolish. It's paradoxical to common sense. And yet, it is that love that Jesus demonstrates. It's that love that God demonstrated on that night so many centuries ago when God came into the world as the son of a peasant. And through that son of a peasant was able to bring hope and peace and joy and love to each one of us. And when that love reigns, then the land is redeemed. Let me pray for you. Holy and awesome God of Advent, we are so thankful that you come to us in unexpected ways, and that your ministry of love can enter into our lives and affect us in so many unexpected ways. And we know sometimes it might seem like it's not coming, God, but you are there. And through the difficult times and through the joyous times, you are there to be with us. God, we ask that as we're in those times, that we might remember that everything that is good comes from you, and that you are always showering goodness upon us. Help us to open our eyes to see that goodness. Help us to open our hearts to receive it. And help us to open our mouths that we might respond by singing your praise to the entire land. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.